Coming to you from a vacation rental in my hometown for reasons. Hamamatsu is a beautiful city on the JR line between Tokyo and Kyoto, but it's not one that's often celebrated by the tourists. I went there because I was aiming to go somewhere nearby, and I did it all wrong. But I did enjoy my time in Hamamatsu. Hamamatsu is famous as a city of music since at least 1991, when it started holding the Hamamatsu International Piano Competition every 3 years. It's also famous for its manufacture of musical instruments and Suzuki and Yamaha motorcycles. Also, it's the birthplace of the Honda Motor Factory. There's a flower garden that they promote, though I hadn't heard of it until I started looking into Hamamatsu. It's on the southern coast of the main island of Japan, and it's famous for its sand dunes, as well as its freshwater eel from the neighboring lake. That's a food in case you missed it. Mostly, it's the influence of the music that I noticed. I stayed in the Act City Hotel Tower, which is attached to the music hall where they hold the International Piano Festival every 3 years. The hotel is built to look like a giant harmonica, and the music theme is prominent throughout. These lights on the elevator are made to look like grand piano outlines, and the surround on the buttons looks like the silhouette of a violin body. Also, this was the cheapest hotel I stayed at on my trip, and it had the best service. They do have buckwheat pillows on their beds, which I could not get used to. Some tourists come back and they immediately buy one. They rave about how wonderful they are. To me, it was like sleeping on a bag of beans. I just couldn't get used to it. And then I headed to the Hamamatsu Musical Instrument Museum. This was one of the only things that I knew that I wanted to do in Hamamatsu. The Hamamatsu Musical Instrument Museum has more types of instruments than I thought existed in the entire world. They have all the ones you'd expect: pianos and trumpets and tubas and drums and things like that, ocarinas and flutes, oddball stringed instruments and other keyboard instruments. Just the coolest collection of instruments you could possibly imagine. And in front of some of the instruments, they have a little stand with headphones so you can pull them off and hear a little sample of the music from that instrument. And if it's kind of a keyboard instrument or it's got a weird action inside of it, then there will be an acrylic display that you can see into and see how the hammer hits the string or however it works. Then there's a live brass band that plays almost every day, and they are flawless. It's really amazing. After the Musical Instrument Museum, I looked for the Hamamatsu Science Museum. It's a hands-on museum like the Exploratorium in San Francisco. My only problem is it's not for casual tourists like me who don't speak Japanese very well. None of it's in English. That's fine. It just was not for tourists. So I don't recommend it if your Japanese is as bad as mine. I did some shopping there, and then I went looking for fluffy pancakes. I don't know if you've seen these all over Instagram and TikTok and things, but Japanese souffle pancakes are the hot item right now. And I wanted to try some of these. So somebody had posted a blog that said that you could find these pancakes at this little cafe at the train station. I was excited about that because I was really close to the train station. And so I got there and I ordered, and it was disappointing. It was not what I was expecting. They were not those cool souffle pancakes. They were like angel food cake that was about an inch thick and pretending to be pancakes. It was still delicious, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't what I was hoping for. I tried to hang out more. I listened to a couple of buskers playing their instruments on the corner. I couldn't get into the nightlife though. I was just too tired. I'm always tired. So I went back to my hotel and I watched one of the American-made Godzilla movies. It was funny to me that I was watching an American-made Godzilla movie in Japan with Japanese subtitles. So the next day I had to be somewhere in the early afternoon, but I did have a few hours in the morning. First I stashed my stuff at the station, then I went for a walk for a mile or so, found another one of those little Shinto shrines. Well, of course I did. It's my favorite thing to do in Japan. Go find a Goshuin, the shrine stamp. Then I headed to the Hamamatsu Castle. Hamamatsu might not have the rich history of Tokyo and Kyoto, but they do have prehistoric ruins there. I went for something a little more modern, in the past 400 years. Hamamatsu Castle. It's up on a hill in a park in the middle of the city. Hamamatsu Castle was the home of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the inspiration for Yoshi Toranaga, the title character in James Clavell's Shogun, if you've ever read that book. The castle is smaller than it was originally. There's a whole lot of foundation that they don't use anymore ever since it was rebuilt. And besides the top of the well in the basement, nothing else is original. It's been turned into a museum inside. I did enjoy my visit though. My whole purpose in coming to Hamamatsu was to be closer to Kakegawa, where the Yamaha Piano Factory is found. Reservations are required, but there's no cost. I did have to call from the United States to make the reservation, and I had written out this little script in case the person on the other end didn't speak good English. Thank goodness, their English was perfect, which was really good because my Japanese still wouldn't have been good enough to make a simple reservation. I need to pause and tell you a story. So I needed to be in Kakegawa in the afternoon for this tour. Google Maps told me that the fastest way to get to the Yamaha Piano Factory in Kakegawa was to take the JR bus from the JR train station in Hamamatsu. And I had just the weirdest interaction I had in Japan, bar none. So I started every interaction with anybody Japanese the same way. I always said, "Eigo hanashimasu ka?" which means, "Do you speak English?" "Eigo hanashimasu ka?" I went up to this lady at this desk and I said, "Eigo hanashimasu ka?" She says, "Eigo hanashimasu ka?" She repeated my question back to me, "Do you speak English?" "Eigo hanashimasu ka?" "Eigo hanashimasu ka?" turning to her partner. And then she points at her like, "Presenting, Eigo hanashimasu ka?" And then she bows to me, "Eigo hanashimasu ka?" And she had this lovely customer service smile on her face, so I knew she wasn't mocking me, but I was just so confused by the whole thing. What is happening here? After all that, her partner told me that I was at the wrong spot and I needed to go around the corner to the JR bus station. So my plan was to take this bus from the Hamamatsu station to the Kakegawa bus station, store my stuff in a locker, and then walk over to the piano factory. And after that, I'd take a bus or a train to Tokyo later that night. I didn't realize you had to reserve a bus ticket ahead of time too, like possibly the instant that I arrived in Hamamatsu. So the people at the desk were very surprised that I wanted one for right that moment. Only a little bit of difficulty and I was on my way. So, like I said, my plan was to arrive at the Kakegawa bus station, shove my stuff into a locker, and then walk to the piano factory. The bus ride took about an hour and a half, and when we arrived, I was bummed to find that this was not a bus station. This was a sign on the side of the road that said bus stop. There were no lockers. And then there's a bunch of country fields. I don't know if they were rice fields or some other crop, but they were definitely agriculture. I was sure I was in the wrong spot. And to top it all off, I had to drag my rolling suitcase, my backpack, and my carry-on. But Google Maps did tell me I was in the right spot, and it was 1 more kilometer and I was there. I found the factory, and there was a security guard who told me I was at the wrong gate and I needed to go up the road. That was after I tried to wander into the industrial part with all the forklifts and things. Japanese people are so forgiving. As long as you're respectful, a bow and sumimasen, which means I'm sorry, will pay for almost any accidental social faux pas. So I showed up to the right place, sweating from having dragged my luggage through the heat through the farmland, and the people there were just so kind. I know I keep saying that, so kind, so kind, so kind, but it's really the perfect description. Japanese people are raised with excellent manners, and it is so easy to get along with them. They work hard to smooth away misunderstandings and problems to try to make everyone around them feel comfortable. And that's what manners are for, to make people around you feel comfortable. The factory had a luggage room for stupid tourists like me who don't plan well and then have to tote everything all the way to the factory. So I parked it all there and they handed me an iPhone as a listening device so I would have English explanations in my ear throughout the whole tour. They explained that since there were Japanese people on the tour and it was basically for Japanese people, I would have to use the listening device and then the tour would be done in Japanese. I need to back up a bit. When I booked this tour over the phone, the receptionist started asking me questions about my experience with pianos. Are you a piano salesperson? Are you a piano teacher? Are you a piano repair person? Are you an importer or exporter of pianos? I am none of those. I am a very bad piano player. I've been playing about 15 years on and off, and I'm kind of just barely past the beginner level. Maybe? Is it still all right if I take the tour? Of course, we'd be happy to accommodate you. But after all those questions, I was worried. Would I be the only layperson on a tour filled with piano professionals? I was imagining concert pianists and piano business people, like 15 guys in suits showing up to share the tour with me. I didn't have to worry. There were 2 other people on the tour, and they were a mother and daughter, and the daughter was 2, and they were running late. So the first part of the tour happened in English, just for me. I was allowed to take photos and videos in the lobby, but they were very clear that there would be no pictures or videos once the tour began. We started with a film in a big room with about 50 chairs. The film was hosted by a cartoon cat. It explained how the body, the outside of the piano, was formed because that was done at a different facility. What was really cool was there would be times during the film where somebody on screen would play the piano. The music did not come out of the speakers, it came out of a player piano in the corner of the room. So that was a really nice touch. After that, we went back out in the lobby, and my guide, who spoke perfect English, by the way, my guide sat down at some of the keyboard instruments and played several little songs for me to hear the differences. Some of them were simpler songs and some of them were more elaborate. And she asked me about my experience with piano, and I had to honestly tell her I could play one of those simpler ones if I had a couple of weeks first to practice it. I'm pretty bad. From there, we entered the factory, and the mother and daughter joined us for the rest of the tour. My guide switched to Japanese, and I used the earphones. Each stop on the tour had a numbered sign above it, and I could punch the number into the iPhone to hear the description in English. The tour was really amazing. I got to see them install the metal plate, and the pins, and the keys, and the strings, and just everything. I was really surprised to see that none of this was done by robots. It was all done by humans. They have lots of specialized equipment that they're working with, but it's all manual labor. I take that back. There were a couple of robotic things, or automated processes at least. Like there was an automated cart that would carry the grand pianos to the next step. And also there was a machine that we got to see through a window in a soundproof room. The machine had things that would play the keys 300 times over 4 minutes to loosen up the piano keys before the final tuning. But even the tuning was done by a human. There was a person there who would lean over the piano and play it, listen, and check the tone on their device, and then crank with a wrench, and then play it again and continue. Anyway, that's all to say it's not an automated process. I was amazed at how much manpower it takes to make a piano perfect. And at some point along the way, the mother decided her toddler had had just too much stimulation and left and thanked the guide. And so the guide switched back to English for my benefit. And after touring the factory, the guide took me into a room with 3 grand pianos side by side by side. She explained that even though the pianos are made identically, each one has its own fingerprint or its own sound. And she asked me if I wanted to play all 3 pianos to see the difference between them. I told her, no, thank you. I even had a nightmare about this exact scenario yesterday, that at the end of this tour, I'd be asked to play in front of people. She graciously did not push me on that point, and she sat down herself to play a little song so I could hear the difference. It was a great experience. And if you're a pianist or a piano professional or just a piano enthusiast like me, it was well worth it. If I were to do this again, I would do it completely differently. I would not take the JR bus line at all. I would catch the JR train line to Kakegawa station. I would stow my luggage there, and then I'd take this little side train up to the Sakuragi station, which is only like a kilometer from the Yamaha Piano Factory. Why would I do this differently, you ask? Part of that would be to be able to store my luggage and to have a much more direct route to the piano factory. But this calls for another story. Google Maps failed me on this particular journey, both in not recommending Kakegawa station, and as I was walking towards the Sakuragi station to get to Kakegawa, it failed to inform me that I was walking in the wrong direction. And I couldn't stare at the screen, and so I had my earbuds in, and I was hoping she would just tell me where to go. And the only thing that it said was, head north. That was the only warning I got that I was walking in the wrong direction for 11 minutes. Finally, I started to wonder, and I said, I should be turning to the right or left pretty soon, shouldn't I? And I looked at the map and found I'd been walking in the wrong direction. So I went back and I made sure to wave as I passed the piano factory because I'm sure they saw me go the wrong direction and they were probably worried about me. So I made sure to wave to say, I'm doing good now. Sakuragi station was not very far, but it was very confusing for poor me. So I'd just been in Tokyo and Kyoto, and they had big digital signs that said, if you want to go to this place, stand on this platform. It'll be here in 7 minutes. Sakuragi station is not like that at all. It's this little out-of-the-way country bumpkin station. It's got lots of little toys for kids to play on while they're waiting. It's got pictures people have painted. There's a statue that I think is made of mufflers standing over in the flower bed. There are no signs. There are no maps. There are no schedules at all. I was worried that the worst case scenario would happen and I would get on the train going in the wrong direction, have to wait for an hour or 2 hours before I could get on a train going back the correct direction towards Tokyo. And I spent several minutes just stressing and running back and forth from track to track and trying to find some kind of clue that would help me decide which side of the tracks I needed to stand on. I was working myself into a real panic. Then finally another human being came to the station. It was a young lady in her middle school uniform. Although I recognize that it is problematic for a 45-year-old man to approach a 12 or 13-year-old girl, I really felt like she was my only lifeline. I apologized and I bowed and I apologized again, and I tried to explain in my bad Japanese that I was trying to go to Tokyo and could she help me. She was very helpful. She gave me a very long and detailed explanation. She was probably trying to be very thorough. I couldn't understand anything she said. She might as well have been saying blah, 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 blah. And so I tried to help her dumb it down for me. So I said, do I stand over here or do I stand over there to catch the train? And she once again said blah, 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 blah. She hadn't yet realized that I was so bad at Japanese, but this next question got it. I said, here or there? Do I stand here or do I stand there? She got it. She pointed where I was standing and she said, Koko, here. So thanks to her, I got on the right train. She went to the other side of the tracks, maybe just to get away from me, but I got where I was going. Thank you, young lady. So I got on the train going in the correct direction. I tried to pay the conductor. He said, no, you'll pay later outside. I understood that much. There was a chart on the wall saying how much each destination would be, and looking at Kakegawa from Sakuragi, I thought that I was gonna have to pay 200 yen. When I got out, there was a gentleman with a little cardboard box, and I dropped 200 yen in there, and he stopped me. And he said something to me, and the only thing I got out of that whole thing was hachi, which is 8. And so I thought, oh, it's supposed to be 800. And so I pulled out another 600 yen and I put it in the box, and he stopped me real quick and he repeated what he had said first. Nihyakuhachiju, 280, and he handed me back 520 yen. How am I so bad at Japanese? Like, the word for 800 doesn't even have hachi in it. They cut it down and it's hapyaku for 800 instead of hachi hyaku. I got into the main station and I must have looked really pathetic there, because before I'd even touched the machine to try to order my tickets, a guy came running out to help me. So a lot of people were involved in helping me get to Tokyo. Thank you, Japanese people, for all your help. Arigatou gozaimashita. After all that wild and crazy mess, I finally made it to Tokyo. Thank goodness. But that's a story for another video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.